The barbecue smoke drifted across our manicured suburban lawn like a fog of false friendships, and I should have seen the knife coming before it slid between my ribs. But hindsight is 20/20, and at that moment I was just Dave Mitchell, small-time realtor, standing beside the grill with a beer in my hand, watching my wife Alicia hold court near the patio table. "Seriously, though," Alicia said, her voice carrying that particular pitch it got after her third glass of wine. "Who wants to trade my husband? He comes with low maintenance and zero ambition." The neighbors laughed. Richard and Nikki from across the street, the Hendersons from 2 houses down, even old Mrs. Patterson, who usually kept to herself. But it was Dominic's response that made my stomach drop like a stone through water. "I'll take him," our next-door neighbor said with that cocky grin of his. "When should I pick him up?" More laughter, louder this time, the kind that cuts through you like a rusty blade. I stood there, tongs in hand, watching my wife's face light up with genuine amusement at the joke that was apparently my entire existence. 22 years of marriage reduced to a punchline at a backyard barbecue. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been grilling burgers for people who were apparently grilling me. "Dave's harmless," Alicia continued, gesturing toward me with her wine glass. "He sells houses to nice families and comes home to watch boxing reruns. No drama, no surprises, no pulse," Dominic finished, and the crowd erupted again. I flipped a burger with more force than necessary, the sizzle matching the heat building in my chest. Dominic Walsh, 6'2" of construction worker muscle and suburban swagger, the kind of guy who wore his masculinity like a badge and his wedding ring like a suggestion. He'd moved in next door 3 years ago with his wife Janet and somehow worked his way into our social circle with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. "At least he's reliable," Nikki offered, though her tone suggested she was damning me with faint praise. "Reliable," Alicia repeated, tasting the word like it left a bitter flavor. "Yes, that's Dave. Reliable as a Honda Civic and about half as exciting." I wanted to remind her that Honda Civics lasted longer than most marriages these days, but I kept my mouth shut. That was my specialty, apparently, keeping quiet while the world decided what I was worth. The conversation drifted to other topics, but I caught the looks exchanged between Alicia and Dominic. Quick glances that lingered just a beat too long. The way she laughed at his jokes with her head tilted back, exposing the curve of her neck. The way he leaned in when she spoke, like her words were state secrets. I'd been a boxer once, back in college. Never great, but good enough to know when someone was setting up for a knockout punch. The signs were all there, the footwork, the positioning, the way your opponent's eyes telegraphed their intentions. I just hadn't realized I was in the ring. The party wound down around 10, guests filtering back to their perfect suburban lives with their perfect suburban secrets. Dominic was among the last to leave, helping Alicia clean up while I packed away the grill. I watched him carry plates to the kitchen, his hand brushing hers as she reached for the same dish. "Thanks for a great evening," he said at the door, his voice carrying that easy confidence that came from never having been truly tested. "We should do this more often." "Absolutely," Alicia replied, and something in her tone made me look up from wiping down the patio table. After everyone left, I found myself standing in our kitchen, watching my wife rinse wine glasses with unusual attention to detail. She hummed softly, something she only did when she was particularly pleased about something. "Good party," I said, testing the waters. She agreed without looking at me. "Dominic's so funny, don't you think? Such a breath of fresh air." Oh, fresh air, like our marriage had been suffocating her. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I headed upstairs, leaving her to her humming and her wine-stained memories. In our bedroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror, 34 years old, still in decent shape despite Alicia's jokes about my sedentary lifestyle. I hit the boxing gym 3 times a week, kept my weight steady, still had most of my hair, but looking at myself through the lens of that evening's entertainment, I saw what everyone else apparently saw, a man who'd settled for ordinary in a world that celebrated extraordinary. That night, I lay in bed listening to Alicia shower, then watching her go through her elaborate skincare routine. She'd started taking longer with it lately, I realized. More products, more attention to details that hadn't seemed to matter much a year ago. "Dave," she said, sliding into bed beside me. "What Dominic said tonight? You know he was just joking, right?" I turned to look at her. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked younger somehow, more like the woman I'd married fresh out of law school. Back when she'd thought my boxing background was romantic instead of primitive, when she'd called my real estate work building communities instead of low ambition. "Sure," I said. "Just jokes." She smiled and kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like checking off a box than showing affection. Then she rolled over, pulling the covers with her, and within minutes her breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening's highlights reel of humiliation. 22 years, and this was what we'd become, a comedy routine for the neighbors' entertainment. But it was more than that, wasn't it? The looks, the touches, the way Dominic had lingered at our door like he belonged there. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message at 11:47 p.m., probably Richard thanking us for hosting, or maybe Mrs. Patterson complaining about the noise. I almost ignored it, then curiosity got the better of me. The message wasn't for me. It was from Alicia's phone, sitting on her nightstand, the screen lighting up with an incoming text from Dom. Had a great time tonight. Can't wait for our weekend getaway, just the two of us this time. I read it twice, then 3 times, each reading hitting like a left hook to the solar plexus. Our weekend getaway, just the two of us. I set my phone down carefully, quietly, and closed my eyes. In the darkness, I could hear Alicia's steady breathing, peaceful and content. She was probably dreaming about fresh air and weekend getaways, about trading up from her reliable Honda Civic of a husband. The punchline, it turned out, was my life. But every good joke needs a setup, and every setup needs a payoff. As I lay there in the dark, listening to my wife sleep beside me while her lover's text glowed on the nightstand, I began to understand something fundamental about comedy. Timing was everything, and my time was just beginning. The next morning arrived with the kind of artificial cheerfulness that suburban Saturdays specialized in. Alicia bounced around the kitchen making coffee and toast, humming that same tune from the night before. She wore her favorite yoga pants and a tank top that showed off the results of her recent gym membership, another new development I'd been too oblivious to question. "I'm meeting Jennifer for brunch," she announced, buttering her toast with precise, efficient movements. Girl talk, you know how it is. Jennifer Hartwell, her best friend since law school. The kind of woman who treated marriage like a business merger and friendship like a competitive sport. If anyone would encourage Alicia's extracurricular activities, it would be Jennifer. "Sounds fun," I said, pouring my own coffee. "Mind if I tag along? Haven't seen Jennifer in a while." The knife paused in its butter-spreading motion for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, you'd be bored. We're going to talk about work stuff, maybe do some shopping after. You hate shopping." True enough, but I also hated being lied to, and that was becoming a more pressing concern. "Fair point," I agreed. "I'll probably hit the gym, then maybe show the Peterson house to that couple from Chicago." Relief flickered across her face. "Perfect. We'll both have a productive day." After she left in a cloud of expensive perfume and fabricated enthusiasm, I sat in our kitchen nursing my coffee and staring out the window at Dominic's house. His truck was still in the driveway, a massive Ford F-250 that he'd customized with chrome details and aggressive tires, the vehicular equivalent of a peacock's plumage. I'd always prided myself on being a rational man, logical, the kind of guy who looked at evidence before jumping to conclusions. But that text message had shifted something fundamental in my worldview, like adjusting the focus on a camera and suddenly seeing details that had been blurry before, the late nights at the office that had become more frequent over the past 6 months. The new clothes that appeared in her wardrobe, more stylish and form-fitting than her usual conservative style. The way she'd started working out with a trainer, claiming she needed to feel good about herself again. The mysterious phone calls she'd take in the other room, her voice dropping to quiet, secretive tones. I'd attributed it all to a midlife renaissance, maybe some kind of delayed reaction to turning 35. But now, viewed through the lens of that text message, it painted a different picture entirely. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. Richard's name appeared on the screen. "Dave, my man." His voice boomed through the speaker. "Hell of a party last night. Nikki's still laughing about Dominic's comeback." "Yeah, hilarious stuff." "Hey, you okay? You sound a little off." Richard had been my friend since college, back when we'd both harbored dreams of making it big, him in finance, me in the ring. We'd both settled for smaller versions of those dreams, but somehow he'd managed to maintain his optimism while mine had apparently become a source of neighborhood entertainment. "Just tired," I said. "Long week showing houses to people who can't afford them." "Tell me about it. Listen, Nikki wanted me to invite you and Alicia over for dinner next Friday. She's trying out some new recipe she saw on the cooking channel. I'll check with Alicia and get back to you." "Everything good with you two? I mean, the jokes last night were pretty rough, but you know how these neighborhood things get. Everyone's just blowing off steam." I appreciated that he'd noticed, even if he was trying to minimize it. "We're fine. Just the usual married couple stuff." "Good to hear. Marriage is work, right? But it's worth it when you find the right person. After we hung up, I found myself wondering if I'd ever really found the right person, or if I'd just found someone willing to settle for me until something better came along. The thought sat in my stomach like a stone. I decided to take a drive, ostensibly to check on some listings, but really just to get out of the house and think. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed Dominic's wife Janet working in their front garden. She looked up and waved, and I found myself pulling over to talk to her. "Beautiful morning," she said, straightening up and brushing dirt off her gloves. Janet was a pleasant woman, maybe a few years younger than Alicia, with the kind of natural prettiness that didn't require expensive maintenance. "Perfect for yard work," I agreed. "Dominic not helping out today?" Something flickered across her expression, annoyance, maybe, or resignation. "He's got some project he's working on. You know how men are with their hobbies." I didn't, actually. My hobbies were pretty straightforward. Boxing at Murphy's gym 3 times a week, watching old fights on YouTube, reading real estate market reports, nothing that required secrecy or took me away from home for mysterious weekend getaways. "Well, the garden looks great," I said. "You've got a real talent for it." "Thanks. It's nice to have something that's just mine, you know? Something I can control." There was an edge to her voice that made me look at her more closely. Janet had always seemed content with her life, happy to play the role of supportive wife to Dominic's alpha male routine, but standing there in her garden, dirt under her fingernails and frustration in her eyes, she looked like someone who'd been keeping her own secrets. "I should let you get back to it," I said. "Tell Dominic I said hi." "If I see him," she replied, then caught herself. "I mean, when he gets back from his project?" I drove aimlessly through our subdivision, past houses I'd sold to families who'd probably moved here with the same hopes Alicia and I had 22 years ago. The American dream in brick and vinyl siding, complete with 2-car garages and the promise that happiness could be purchased with the right mortgage terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "Brunch running long. Don't wait up for lunch. Love you. Love you." 2 words that had become as routine as brushing teeth. Devoid of meaning, but necessary for maintaining the illusion of normalcy. I wondered if she'd sent similar messages to Dominic, or if their communications had moved beyond such pleasantries. Instead of heading to the gym as planned, I found myself driving toward downtown, to the trendy district where Alicia liked to meet Jennifer for their girls' brunches. It wasn't stalking, I told myself. It was market research. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I could figure out how to handle it. I parked across the street from Cafe Luna, their usual spot, and waited. 20 minutes later, I saw them through the window, Alicia and Jennifer, heads bent together in intense conversation. But no shopping bags, no casual girl talk atmosphere. This looked more like a strategy session. Jennifer was gesturing emphatically, her expression serious. Alicia nodded along, occasionally glancing around as if checking to make sure they weren't being overheard. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't work gossip or weekend shopping plans. My phone rang again. This time it was a client, asking about a showing for the Peterson house. I arranged to meet them in an hour, grateful for the distraction and the excuse to leave before I did something stupid, like march into the cafe and demand answers. But as I drove away, I caught sight of Dominic's truck parked 2 blocks down from the cafe. He was sitting behind the wheel, checking his phone with the same kind of focused attention Alicia had been giving her conversation with Jennifer. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it wasn't the abstract art I'd been hoping for. This was more like a paint-by-numbers betrayal, complete with coordination and planning. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was orchestrating one with Jennifer as her advisor and Dominic as her willing accomplice. I spent the rest of the day showing houses to a young couple from Chicago, watching them envision their future in empty rooms and unfinished spaces. They held hands as they walked through each property, finishing each other's sentences and making plans for furniture placement and holiday decorations. "This could be our forever home," the woman said, standing in the master bedroom of the Peterson house. Forever. I remembered when Alicia and I had used that word, back when we'd bought our own house in this same neighborhood. We'd stood in our empty bedroom making similar plans, believing in forever like it was a guarantee instead of a hope. "It's a solid house," I told them. "Good bones, established neighborhood, the kind of place where you can build a life." They made an offer that afternoon, another happy ending for another young couple who still believed in the possibility of forever. I filled out the paperwork and submitted it to the sellers, then drove home to face whatever version of forever I had left. Alicia was in the kitchen when I arrived, cooking dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She'd changed clothes since brunch, now wearing a dress I didn't recognize, something that hugged her figure in ways that seemed designed to make a statement. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. productive. Might have sold the Peterson house. That's wonderful. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, which somehow made it worse. We should celebrate. She opened a bottle of wine, the good stuff we usually saved for special occasions, and poured 2 glasses. We sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten thousands of meals over the years, and made small talk about real estate and her brunch with Jennifer. Jennifer's thinking about leaving her firm, Alicia said, swirling wine in her glass. Starting fresh, maybe finding something more exciting. Exciting how? Oh, you know Jennifer. She gets restless when things become too routine. She needs challenge, adventure, the thrill of something new. I nodded, understanding that we weren't really talking about Jennifer's career prospects. And what do you think about that? I think life's too short to settle for boring, she said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time all evening. Don't you? There it was, the challenge, delivered with a smile and wrapped in wine-softened words. She was testing me, seeing if I'd fight for what we had or roll over like the reliable, low-maintenance husband everyone expected me to be. Boring can be underrated, I said carefully. Stability has its own value. Does it? She leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Sometimes I wonder if we've confused stability with stagnation. And sometimes I wonder if people confuse excitement with stupidity. The words hung in the air between us, sharper than I'd intended. Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw a flash of something, surprise maybe, or annoyance that her reliable husband had shown a hint of backbone. That's an interesting perspective, she said finally. Very safe. Safe, another word that had apparently become an insult in my wife's vocabulary. I finished my wine and stood up, suddenly tired of the verbal chess game we'd been playing. I'm going to watch some TV, I announced. Thanks for dinner. As I walked toward the living room, I heard her phone buzz on the kitchen counter, then her voice dropping to that intimate whisper I'd been noticing more often. Hi, she said. Yes, everything's fine. Just having dinner with Dave. Just having dinner with Dave. Like I was an obligation to be endured rather than a husband to be cherished. I settled into my recliner and turned on the television, but I wasn't really watching. I was listening to the rhythm of her conversation, the way her voice changed when she talked to him. 22 years of marriage, and I'd become background noise in my own life. The reliable Honda Civic parked in the driveway while she went looking for something with more horsepower. But Honda Civics, I reflected, had one significant advantage over flashier models. They were built to last, and when pushed to their limits, they could surprise you with what they were capable of. It was time to find out what I was capable of. Sunday morning brought the kind of suburban tranquility that made secrets seem louder. I woke early, before Alicia, and made coffee in the pre-dawn quiet of our kitchen. Through the window, I could see Dominic's house, dark except for a single light in what I knew was his home office. Either he was an early riser, or he hadn't slept much. I'd spent most of Saturday night thinking, planning, trying to figure out my next move. The old me, the reliable, predictable Dave, would have confronted Alicia directly, demanded explanations, maybe suggested marriage counseling. But that approach assumed she wanted to save what we had. The evidence suggested otherwise. Alicia appeared around 8, wearing a silk robe that had been a Christmas gift from me 2 years ago. She moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who had places to be and people to see. I'm going to the gym, she announced, pouring coffee into a travel mug. Then maybe some errands. Which gym? I asked casually. The question caught her off guard. The usual one. Why? Just curious. I've been thinking about switching from Murphy's. Maybe we could work out together sometime. Her smile was tight, forced. That's sweet, but you know how I am about my workout time. It's my chance to decompress. Or to compress with someone else, I thought. Of course, I wouldn't want to interfere with your decompression. After she left, I made my own trip to Murphy's gym. It wasn't the trendy fitness center where Alicia had been decompressing, but an old-school boxing gym that smelled like sweat and determination. Murphy himself was a former heavyweight who'd trained fighters for 40 years, and he'd been working with me since I'd started coming here 3 years ago. You're hitting harder today, Murphy observed, watching me work the heavy bag. Something eating at you? Just working through some frustration, I said, landing a particularly solid combination. Good. Frustration makes you focus, as long as you don't let it make you stupid. He adjusted my stance slightly. Remember, boxing isn't about throwing the hardest punch. It's about throwing the right punch at the right time. I spent an hour working through combinations, each punch helping me think more clearly. By the time I finished, I had the beginnings of a plan. Not revenge, exactly. That was too crude, too obvious. This was more like a counter-strategy, designed to level the playing field. My first stop was Best Buy, where I purchased a small digital recorder and a basic GPS tracker, both perfectly legal for a husband to use in his own home and on his own property. Then I drove to Office Depot for a few other supplies. Nothing dramatic, just tools for gathering information. The GPS tracker went under Alicia's car while she was at her gym session. The digital recorder found a home in our kitchen, tucked behind the coffee maker where it could capture conversations. I also installed a phone monitoring app on our shared computer. Again, perfectly legal since we were married and it was our joint account. I wasn't proud of the surveillance, but I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I could respond appropriately. In boxing, you studied your opponent's patterns, learned their tells, identified their weaknesses. This was no different. The information started flowing immediately. The GPS showed that Alicia's gym sessions often included stops at locations that weren't gyms, coffee shops, parks, and frequently a hotel on the east side of town. The phone monitoring revealed text exchanges that confirmed my worst suspicions and added details I hadn't expected. But the most revealing discovery came from the digital recorder. That evening, while I was supposedly watching television in the living room, Alicia made a call from the kitchen that changed everything. "Jennifer, it's me," she said, her voice low but clear enough for the recorder to capture. "We need to accelerate the timeline." Jennifer's response was tinny through the phone speaker, but audible. "Are you sure? We talked about taking this slow." "Dave's getting suspicious. He asked about the gym today, and he's been watching me differently. I think he knows something." "What do you want to do?" "I think it's time for the nuclear option, the thing we discussed about his finances." My hand tightened on the remote control. What thing about my finances? "That seems extreme," Jennifer said, "and risky." "Less risky than letting him figure out what's really going on. Besides, once the divorce is final, it won't matter. I'll have what I need, and he'll be too busy dealing with his own problems to cause trouble." Divorce. The word hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. Not only was my wife having an affair, but she was planning to leave me and apparently destroy me financially in the process. The reliable Honda Civic was about to be traded in, but not before being stripped for parts. "What about Dominic?" Jennifer asked. "What about him? He's useful for now, but he's not exactly long-term material. Too needy, too obvious. I need someone with more sophistication." I had to admire her honesty, even as it twisted in my chest like a blade. Dominic wasn't her Prince Charming. He was just a convenient tool for breaking up her marriage. The poor guy probably thought he was winning the lottery when he was actually being used as a wrecking ball. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, covering logistics and timing. They were planning to implement their nuclear option within the next 2 weeks, right before Alicia filed for divorce. Whatever they had planned, it was designed to leave me defenseless and financially ruined. I turned off the television and sat in the dark living room, processing what I'd learned. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was orchestrating a complete destruction of my life, with help from her best friend and using my neighbor as the weapon. It was thorough, calculated, and absolutely ruthless. It was also a mistake. See, Alicia had always underestimated me. To her, I was the reliable guy who sold houses and watched boxing, who went along with her social climbing and never caused trouble. She saw stability and assumed passivity. She saw predictability and assumed stupidity. But she'd forgotten something important about my background. Before I became a real estate agent, before I settled into suburban respectability, I'd been a boxer. Not a great one, but good enough to learn some fundamental truths about competition. First, never underestimate your opponent, especially when they seem harmless. Second, the best defense is often a devastating offense. Third, timing is everything, and patience is a weapon. I spent the next week gathering more information while maintaining my normal routine. The GPS tracker revealed the full scope of Alicia's activities: regular meetings with Dominic at the hotel, strategy sessions with Jennifer at various locations, and several visits to a law office downtown that specialized in aggressive divorce representation. The phone monitoring showed me their entire communication network: text messages between Alicia and Dominic that were equal parts romantic and strategic, conversations with Jennifer that read like military planning sessions, and most importantly, exchanges with her lawyer about something called financial discovery that made my stomach turn. They were planning to claim that I'd been hiding assets, skimming money from real estate commissions, and living a secret life of financial deception. It was complete fiction, but it would tie up our divorce proceedings for months while my reputation was destroyed and my real estate license was investigated. By the time I could prove my innocence, Alicia would have cleaned out our accounts and disappeared with her share of everything we'd built together. It was brilliant, actually. Diabolical, but brilliant. It was also about to backfire spectacularly. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after I'd started my surveillance operation, Alicia announced that she was going out with Jennifer to celebrate a promotion at Jennifer's law firm. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek with the same perfunctory affection she'd been showing for months. "We might make a late night of it." "Have fun," I said. "You deserve to celebrate." She did deserve something, but it wasn't celebration. After she left, I activated the final phase of my counter strategy. I'd spent the week not just gathering information, but preparing for this moment. Everything was in place, the evidence organized, the timeline established, the nuclear option of my own ready to deploy. I started with a simple phone call to Janet Walsh, Dominic's wife. "Hi, Janet. It's Dave from next door. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Dave. What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if you and Dominic might want to join Alicia and me for dinner this weekend. Maybe Saturday night? I thought it would be nice for all of us to get together." There was a pause. "That sounds lovely, but Dominic's been so busy with work lately. He's been putting in a lot of overtime, coming home late most nights." "Really? That's funny. I've seen his truck in the driveway most evenings when I get home from showings." Another pause, longer this time. "You have?" "Yeah, but maybe I'm mistaken. You know how it is. All these trucks look the same." "No," she said slowly. "No, you're probably right. Maybe his overtime isn't quite what I thought it was." I let that sink in for a moment. "Well, regardless, the dinner invitation stands. Let me know if you're interested." "I'll definitely let you know, Dave, and thanks for calling." Phase 1 complete. I'd planted a seed of doubt in Janet's mind about her husband's mysterious overtime. Given what I knew about their marriage from neighborhood gossip, that seed would find fertile ground. Next, I called Richard. "Dave, what's up, buddy?" "Hey, I need a favor. Remember how you work in financial services? I've got a client who thinks her husband might be hiding assets in their divorce. What kind of investigation would that trigger?" "Oh man, that's serious stuff. The court would order a complete financial audit. Bank records, tax returns, business accounts, everything. If they found evidence of hidden assets, the guy would be looking at contempt charges, possible fraud allegations. His professional licenses could be suspended pending investigation." "Why?" "Well, just trying to help a client understand our options. Hypothetically, how long would something like that take? Months, maybe longer. And expensive as hell for everyone involved. The lawyers love those cases because they can bill hundreds of hours just sorting through the paperwork. Is your client sure about this? False accusations can backfire pretty badly. I'll make sure she understands the risks." "Thanks, Richard." "Anytime. Hey, you still on for dinner Friday night? Nikki's been planning this meal all week." "Wouldn't miss it." Phase 2 complete. Now I understood exactly how Alicia's nuclear option was supposed to work, and more importantly, how it could be turned against her. The final phase required a trip to Jennifer's law firm. I'd done some research and learned that Jennifer worked for a mid-sized firm that prided itself on ethical practice and community reputation. They were exactly the kind of place that would take a very dim view of an employee helping to orchestrate fraudulent divorce allegations. I didn't go inside. That would come later. For now, I just wanted to understand the layout, the security, the rhythm of their business. Knowledge was ammunition, and I was loading up for war. By the time Alicia came home that night, smelling like wine and lies, I was back in my recliner watching SportsCenter highlights. She kissed my forehead and went upstairs, probably to text Dominic about their next rendezvous. "How was your evening?" I called after her. "Great," she called back. "Jennifer's promotion is going to open up a lot of new opportunities." New opportunities. That was one way to describe conspiracy to commit fraud. I stayed downstairs for another hour, finalizing my plans and reviewing the evidence I'd collected. Everything was documented, organized, and ready for deployment. In boxing terms, I'd studied my opponent, identified their strategy, and prepared a counterattack that would end the fight decisively. Alicia thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been playing a completely different game altogether. The reliable Honda Civic was about to show everyone what happened when you pushed it past its breaking point. And unlike flashier models, when a Civic finally decided to move, it didn't just accelerate, it endured. The recall notice was about to be issued, and it was going to be spectacular. Friday night at Richard and Nikki's house started like every other suburban dinner party. Wine, small talk, and the comfortable rhythm of couples who'd known each other for years. But I wasn't there for comfort. I was there to begin the systematic destruction of my wife's carefully laid plans. "Dave seems different tonight," Nikki observed as we gathered in their living room before dinner. "More present." She was right. For months, I'd been going through the motions at these social gatherings, playing the role of the reliable husband while my marriage crumbled around me. Tonight, I was fully engaged, watching, listening, preparing. Just had a good week, I said. Closed 3 houses, including that Peterson property I've been working on. That's fantastic, Richard said, raising his wine glass. Here's to Dave's success. Alicia smiled and clinked glasses with everyone else, but I caught the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. My success complicated her narrative about my lack of ambition and professional stagnation. 3 houses, she said. That is unusual for you. The comment was designed to minimize my achievement, to reinforce the image of me as someone who occasionally stumbled into success rather than earned it. 6 months ago, it would have stung. Tonight, it was just more evidence of who she'd really become. Luck of the draw, I said modestly. Right place, right time. Dave's being humble, Nikki interjected. I heard from the Petersons that you went above and beyond helping them with financing issues. That's not luck. That's good business. I appreciated Nikki's support, but more importantly, I appreciated the way it made Alicia's jaw tighten slightly. She didn't like being contradicted, especially when it came to her assessment of my capabilities. Dinner conversation flowed through the usual topics: neighborhood gossip, work stories, vacation plans. I contributed when appropriate, but mostly listened, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to begin my offensive. It came during dessert, when Richard mentioned seeing Dominic's truck around town at odd hours. Funny thing, Richard said, cutting into Nikki's homemade cheesecake. I've been seeing Dom's truck in some interesting places lately. That hotel on 5th Street, a couple of coffee shops downtown. Guy gets around for someone who's supposedly working overtime. Alicia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Maybe he's moonlighting, she suggested. Construction work can be seasonal. Maybe, Richard agreed, though Janet mentioned to Nikki that she's been wondering about his schedule lately. Apparently his overtime doesn't match his paycheck. I watched Alicia process this information, saw her realize that cracks were appearing in their operational security. Good. Uncertainty was exactly what I wanted her feeling right now. Marriage is complicated, I said, entering the conversation with deliberate casualness. People think they know their spouses, but we all have our secrets. That's a rather cynical view, Alicia said, her voice carrying a slight edge. Is it? I think it's realistic. Take financial secrets, for example. I've seen so many divorces where one spouse claims the other was hiding assets, only to discover they were wrong. The accusations end up destroying both of them. Richard nodded knowingly. Those cases are brutal. The investigations, the legal fees, the damage to professional reputations, even when someone's proven innocent, the suspicion lingers. Exactly, I continued, warming to the theme. And if the accusations turn out to be fabricated, if someone's deliberately making false claims, that's a whole different level of legal trouble. Alicia set down her fork entirely. Why are we talking about this? Just making conversation, I said innocently. Though it is relevant to my business, I've had several clients recently who were going through messy divorces. Amazing how quickly things can spiral out of control when trust breaks down. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of forced normalcy, but I could see Alicia's mind working, processing the implications of what she'd heard. By the time we said our goodbyes and headed home, she was unusually quiet. Interesting dinner conversation, she said as we pulled into our driveway. Richard's always been fascinated by legal drama, probably watches too much Law and Order. And you? Are you fascinated by legal drama too? I turned off the engine and looked at her directly. I'm fascinated by truth. Always have been. She held my gaze for a moment, and I saw something shift in her expression, a recognition that the reliable, predictable Dave might not be as predictable as she'd assumed. Saturday morning brought phase 2 of my operation. While Alicia slept in, recovering from what she'd claimed was too much wine at dinner, I made a series of phone calls that would reshape the battlefield. The first call was to my lawyer, not a divorce attorney, but the guy who'd handled our house purchase and various real estate transactions over the years. I needed to understand my legal position and explore some options. Dave, good to hear from you, Tom Bradley said. What can I do for you? I need some advice about asset protection. Hypothetically, if someone were planning to make false accusations about hidden assets in a divorce, what kind of preemptive steps could the accused party take? There was a pause. That's a very specific hypothetical question, Dave. Everything okay at home? Just trying to understand my options. For a client, I added lamely. Right. Well, hypothetically speaking, the best defense would be complete transparency. Detailed financial records, third-party verification of all accounts, maybe even a voluntary audit to establish a clean baseline. If accusations came later, you'd have ironclad proof of your honesty. How long would something like that take? A week, maybe 2, if we're thorough. It's not cheap, but it's a lot less expensive than fighting false accusations after they're made. And if the accusations turned out to be part of a conspiracy, if there was evidence that multiple parties had planned to make fraudulent claims? Another pause, longer this time. Dave, if you're in that kind of situation, you need to be very careful. Conspiracy to commit fraud is serious business. We're talking about criminal charges, not just civil issues. Good to know. Hypothetically. Hypothetically. But Dave, if this stops being hypothetical, call me immediately. The second call was to a private investigator I'd found through a real estate colleague. Sometimes you needed professional help to document infidelity in divorce cases, and I wanted to understand the process. Mitchell Investigations, a gravelly voice answered. Hi, this is Dave Mitchell. I need some information about documenting adultery. Straight to the point. I like that. What's your situation? I explained the basics. Suspicious behavior, evidence of an affair, need for documentation that would hold up in court. I didn't mention the conspiracy angle yet. That would come later. Standard surveillance package runs about $2,000 for a week's worth of work, he said. Photos, video, detailed timeline of activities. Most cases, we get what we need in 3 to 5 days. And if there were multiple parties involved, more complex coordination? Depends on how complex. But adultery cases sometimes uncover other interesting information. Financial irregularities, planning activities, evidence of premeditation. That kind of documentation can be very valuable in divorce proceedings. I'll think about it and get back to you. Don't think too long. These situations tend to escalate quickly once they start moving. The third call was the most important one. I dialed Jennifer's law firm and asked to speak with the managing partner. This is Dave Mitchell, I said when he came on the line. I'm calling about a potential ethics violation involving one of your associates, Jennifer Hartwell. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, but I can't discuss personnel matters with... I'm not asking you to discuss anything, I interrupted. I'm offering to provide you with information, evidence of potential conspiracy to commit fraud in divorce proceedings, using fabricated financial accusations. That got his attention. What kind of evidence? Recorded conversations, documented planning sessions, coordination between your associate and parties to a pending divorce case. The kind of evidence that could destroy your firm's reputation if it became public. Mr. Mitchell, these are very serious allegations. Yes, they are, which is why I thought you'd want to investigate them privately before they become public. I'll be in touch with specifics next week. I hung up before he could respond, leaving him to wonder exactly what kind of evidence I had, and how much trouble Jennifer was about to cause his firm. The final piece of Saturday's puzzle was a visit to Murphy's gym. I needed to work off some nervous energy, but more importantly, I needed to talk to Murphy about strategy. You're fighting different today, Murphy observed as I worked the speed bag. More focused, more controlled. What changed? I figured out who my real opponent is, I said. Good. Most people spend so much time fighting shadows that they miss the actual threat. He adjusted my stance slightly. Remember what I taught you about combinations. Set up your opponent, make them think they know what's coming, then hit them with something they don't expect. What if they're setting up their own combination? Then you better make sure yours lands first, and when it does, make sure it ends the fight. Sunday was quiet, almost peaceful. Alicia spent most of the day on her phone, probably coordinating with Jennifer and Dominic about their accelerated timeline. I could hear the stress in her voice, the urgency that came from knowing their window of opportunity was closing. That evening, as we sat in our living room maintaining the pretense of domestic normalcy, she finally made her move. Dave, we need to talk. Here it was, the moment she'd been building toward for months. I muted the television and turned to face her, my expression carefully neutral. What's on your mind? I think we both know this isn't working anymore. She gestured vaguely at the space between us. We've grown apart, become different people. Maybe it's time we admitted that and figured out how to move forward. Move forward how? I think we should consider a trial separation, sometime apart to figure out what we really want. It was perfectly reasonable, delivered with just the right amount of sadness and reluctance. If I hadn't known about the hotel meetings and the conspiracy with Jennifer, I might have bought it. That's a big step, I said carefully. Have you thought about counseling first? Maybe we could work through whatever's wrong. I've been thinking about this for months, Dave. I don't think counseling can fix what's broken between us. What exactly is broken? She sighed, the sound of someone forced to explain the obvious to someone too dense to understand. We want different things. You're content with your routine, your small successes, your predictable life. I need more than that. More like what? Challenge, excitement, the feeling that I'm building something meaningful instead of just maintaining something comfortable. It was a masterful performance, hitting all the right notes of personal growth and incompatibility. She was positioning herself as someone who'd outgrown our marriage rather than someone who'd betrayed it. And you think separation will help you figure out what you want? I think it will help both of us. Maybe you'll realize you want something different too. Maybe I will, I agreed. When were you thinking we should start this separation? Soon, maybe next week. I could stay with Jennifer while we work out the details. Of course she could. Jennifer probably had the whole timeline mapped out. From separation to divorce filing to financial discovery. They'd thought of everything, except one thing. That seems rushed, I said. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. Maybe we should each consult with lawyers first, make sure we understand our options. A flicker of something, panic, crossed her face. That seems like overkill for a trial separation. Does it? I mean, if this is really about figuring out what we want, we should make sure we're protected legally. What if the separation becomes permanent? What if one of us wants to start dating other people? Dating other people? She tried to sound surprised, but it came out forced. It happens, Alicia. People separate, meet someone new, decide they want to make it official. Better to have the legal framework in place ahead of time. I suppose that makes sense? Good. I'll call Tom Bradley tomorrow, get his advice on how to handle this properly. You should probably consult with someone too. Maybe ask Jennifer for a recommendation? Maybe, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. I unmuted the television, signaling the end of our conversation. Thanks for being honest with me, Alicia. I appreciate that we can handle this like adults. She nodded and went upstairs, probably to call Jennifer and report that their timeline had just hit an unexpected complication. I stayed in my recliner, watching highlights from old boxing matches and thinking about combinations. Murphy was right. The key to a good combination was making your opponent think they knew what was coming, then hitting them with something unexpected. Alicia thought she was controlling the pace and direction of our separation. She thought she had me reacting to her moves instead of making my own. She was about to learn the difference between setting up a combination and walking into one. The reliable Honda Civic had been pushed to its breaking point, and now it was time to show everyone what happened when all that stored energy finally got released. The recall notice wasn't just coming, it was about to be delivered with the force of a knockout punch. And unlike my wife's carefully orchestrated deception, my combination was going to land exactly where I aimed it. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that comes after a storm has been building for too long. I woke before dawn, made coffee, and sat in my kitchen watching the sun rise over our suburban battlefield. Today was the day everything changed. Alicia left early for work, claiming an important meeting with a client. The GPS tracker would tell me if she was really going to her office or making another stop at the hotel on 5th Street. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I had everything I needed. My first stop was Tom Bradley's law office. I'd called ahead and arranged an emergency consultation, bringing with me a manila folder containing the most damaging evidence from my week of surveillance. Dave, Tom said, reviewing the documents I'd spread across his conference table. This is comprehensive. I wanted to be thorough. Recorded conversations, GPS tracking data, phone records, photographs from a private investigator. He looked up at me with something approaching awe. When did you hire a PI? Saturday. Turns out Mitchell Investigations works fast when you pay their rush fee. The photographs were particularly compelling. Alicia and Dominic entering and leaving the hotel, Jennifer meeting with both of them at various locations, timestamps that correlated perfectly with Alicia's claimed gym sessions and work meetings. And you're certain about this conspiracy to make false financial accusations? Listen to the recordings. It's all there. The timeline, the strategy, even Jennifer coaching Alicia on how to make the claims sound credible. Tom played back several key conversations, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. Dave, this is criminal conspiracy. We're not just talking about divorce proceedings anymore. I know, that's why I need to move fast. They're planning to implement their nuclear option this week. What do you want to do? I leaned back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had in months. I want to end this fight before it really starts. Complete financial transparency, documented proof of my honesty, and a counteroffensive that leaves them too busy defending themselves to attack me. That's going to be expensive. Not as expensive as fighting false accusations for the next 2 years while my reputation gets destroyed. Tom nodded slowly. Okay, I'll need 48 hours to arrange the voluntary audit and document review. Can you keep this quiet until then? I can do better than that. I can keep them distracted. My second stop was Jennifer's law firm. I didn't have an appointment, but I didn't need one. I was just delivering a package. I'd like to leave this for Jennifer Hartwell, I told the receptionist, handing her a sealed envelope. It's time sensitive. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. I know about the plan. We should talk before this gets out of hand. Dave Mitchell, along with a phone number for a prepaid cell phone I'd purchased that morning. The message was deliberately vague, designed to create maximum anxiety with minimum information. Jennifer would spend the rest of the day wondering exactly what I knew and how I'd found out. My third stop was the most important one. I drove to Dominic's construction site where he was working on a commercial renovation project. I found him operating a jackhammer, tearing up old concrete with the kind of aggressive enthusiasm that suggested he was working through some frustration of his own. "Dom!" I called out over the noise. He looked up, surprised to see me. We'd never been close friends, just neighbors who occasionally shared a beer at backyard barbecues. My presence at his job site was unexpected enough to make him shut off the jackhammer. "Dave, what brings you out here?" "I wanted to talk to you about Alicia." His face went carefully neutral. "What about her?" "I know about the hotel meetings, the text messages, the weekend getaways you've been planning." For a moment, I thought he might try to deny it. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and I saw the relief that comes from finally being caught. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" He glanced around the construction site, making sure we weren't being overheard. "Look, Dave, I never meant for this to happen. It just developed. I'm sure it did. But that's not really the issue anymore." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and played one of the recorded conversations, the one where Alicia told Jennifer that Dominic was useful for now, but not long-term material. His face went through several expressions as he listened: confusion, hurt, anger, and finally understanding. "She said that about me?" "She said a lot of things about you. None of them particularly flattering." We talked about being together after her divorce." "Did you? Or did she let you think that while she made other plans?" I played another recording, this one detailing how Alicia planned to use the affair as leverage in divorce proceedings while positioning herself for a more sophisticated relationship afterward. "Oh, she's using me," he said, more to himself than to me. "We're both being used, Dom. The difference is, I figured it out in time to do something about it." "What kind of something?" I explained the financial conspiracy, the planned false accusations, the coordinated attack that was designed to destroy my reputation and career while leaving Alicia free to start over with a clean slate and half of everything we'd built together. That's fraud," he said. "Yes, it is, and you're part of it, whether you knew it or not. Your affair provided the emotional justification for her actions. Your text messages and hotel meetings gave her the evidence she needed to claim irreconcilable differences. You've been the perfect unwitting accomplice." He sat down heavily on a pile of construction materials. "What happens now?" "That depends on you. You can keep playing your role in her drama, or you can help me end it." "Help you how?" "By telling the truth about the affair, about her real motivations, about the things she said when she thought no one else was listening." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll go down with her when this whole thing collapses. Because it is going to collapse, Dom. The only question is whether you're standing next to her when it happens, or whether you've moved to safer ground." I left him there to think about his options while I moved on to the final phase of my operation. By the time I got home, my phone was ringing constantly. The prepaid cell had 3 messages from Jennifer, each one more frantic than the last. My regular phone had 2 calls from Alicia, wondering why I wasn't answering. I called Alicia back first. "Dave, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all day." "Just running errands. What's up?" "Jennifer said you stopped by her office. What was that about?" I wanted to ask her about divorce lawyers. For our separation discussion. She seemed like the logical person to ask for recommendations. There was a long pause. "What did you tell her?" "Just that we were having some marital difficulties and I wanted to understand my options." "Why? Is that a problem?" "No, it's just, she seemed upset when she called me." "Maybe she's having a bad day. Law firms can be stressful." Another pause. "Dave, are you okay? You seem different lately." "Different how?" "I don't know. More focused, I guess, like you're planning something." "Maybe I am. Maybe our conversation last night got me thinking about what I really want." "And what do you want?" "Truth," I said simply. "I want to know where we really stand, what we're really dealing with, and how to move forward honestly." That's what I want too. Good. Then we're on the same page. After we hung up, I called Jennifer back using the prepaid phone. Jennifer, this is Dave Mitchell. You left some messages. Dave. Her voice was tight, controlled. I think we need to meet. I think you're right. Tonight, 7 o'clock, Murphy's Bar on Elm Street. That's rather public, don't you think? I prefer witnesses for important conversations. See you at 7. Murphy's Bar was the kind of place where neighborhood secrets went to die. Dim lighting, discreet booths, and a bartender who'd seen everything and forgotten most of it. I arrived early and chose a corner booth where we could talk privately but still be seen by other patrons. Jennifer arrived exactly on time, looking like a lawyer preparing for a hostile deposition. She slid into the booth across from me, her expression carefully neutral. What do you want, Dave? I want you to call off the dogs. I don't know what you're talking about. I placed a small digital recorder on the table between us. This contains about 6 hours of conversations between you and my wife, planning what you called the nuclear option. Should I play some highlights, or do you want to skip the denial phase? Her face went pale, but her voice remained steady. Even if such recordings existed, they wouldn't be admissible in court. Illegal surveillance. Who said anything about court? I'm thinking more about the State Bar Association. Professional ethics violations. Maybe a nice article in the legal newsletter about lawyers who help clients commit fraud. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of her meeting with Alicia and Dominic at a downtown coffee shop. This was taken yesterday. Professional surveillance, completely legal, fully documented. Want to see the rest? She stared at the photo for a long moment. What do you want? I want you to convince Alicia to drop this whole charade. The separation, the divorce, the financial accusations, all of it. Go back to being unhappy married people like the rest of us. And if she won't? Then I release everything. The recordings, the photographs, the timeline of your conspiracy. Your law firm gets a complete package, along with the State Bar and anyone else who might be interested in how you conduct business. You can't prove conspiracy. Jennifer, I have you on tape coaching my wife on how to make false financial accusations sound credible. I have documentation of coordinated meetings, strategic planning sessions, and detailed discussions of illegal activities. A first-year law student could prove conspiracy with this evidence. She was quiet for a long time, processing her options. Finally, she looked up at me with something approaching respect. You're not the man I thought you were. No, I agreed, I'm not. The question is, are you smart enough to recognize that before you destroy your career defending someone who's been using you as much as she's been using everyone else? What makes you think she's using me? I played another recording, this one of Alicia describing Jennifer as useful but limited, and expressing doubts about Jennifer's ability to handle the more sophisticated aspects of their plan. Jennifer's jaw tightened as she listened. She said that? She said a lot of things, about you, about Dominic, about me. The common theme is that we're all disposable once she gets what she wants. And what does she want? A clean slate, a fresh start, and enough money to buy her way into whatever life she thinks she deserves. The question is whether you're going to help her get it, or whether you're going to save yourself while you still can. Jennifer stood up, smoothing down her skirt with hands that shook slightly. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. I'm implementing my own nuclear option tomorrow morning, and after that, everyone's going to be too busy covering their own assets to worry about coordinated strategies. She walked away without another word, leaving me alone with my beer and my thoughts. Phase 1 of the final offensive was complete. Now I had to wait and see how the other pieces would fall. I didn't have to wait long. My regular phone rang as I was finishing my drink. Dave, it's Dominic. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can you meet me at the park on Maple Street, the one with the playground? When? Now. And Dave, come alone. The park was empty except for a few teenagers hanging out by the basketball court. I found Dominic sitting on a bench near the playground equipment, staring out at the empty swings moving slightly in the evening breeze. I've been thinking about what you said today, he began without preamble. And? You're right. About all of it. She's been playing me from the beginning. What gave it away? I called her after you left. Told her we needed to talk about our future together. She got evasive, started talking about how we needed to be patient, wait until her divorce was final, make sure we didn't complicate things. He laughed bitterly. Funny how someone who's supposedly in love with you suddenly becomes very concerned about complications. So what are you going to do? What you suggested? Tell the truth? About the affair, about her plans, about everything I know. That's going to hurt Janet. Janet already knows. She confronted me tonight, said she'd been suspicious for weeks. Apparently your phone call the other night got her thinking, and she started paying attention to details she'd been ignoring. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She's filing for divorce, but she's not trying to destroy me. Says she just wants out of a marriage that stopped working years ago. And Alicia? I'm meeting her tomorrow night to end it. She thinks we're getting together to plan our next move. Instead, I'm going to tell her it's over and that I'm prepared to testify about everything I know. She's not going to take that well. Probably not, but I'm done being used. By her, by anyone. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the empty playground equipment move in the breeze. Two men who'd been manipulated by the same woman, finally figuring out how to stop dancing to her tune. Dave, Dominic said finally. Yeah? I'm sorry, about all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know. I appreciate that. What happens now? Now we see if Alicia is smart enough to recognize when she's beaten or if she's going to force me to finish what she started. I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past houses where other couples were probably having their own conversations about truth and consequences. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, the moment when all the careful planning and strategic positioning would either pay off or collapse into chaos. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not the reliable Honda Civic everyone expected me to be, but something more powerful and infinitely more dangerous when pushed beyond its limits. The recall notice was ready for delivery, and it was going to change everything. The confrontation came at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in our kitchen over leftover Chinese takeout and the wreckage of 22 years of marriage. Alicia walked through the front door with the expression of someone who'd spent the day fighting fires, only to come home and discover her house was burning down. Jennifer had clearly delivered my message, and Dominic had apparently followed through on his promise to end their affair. We need to talk, she said, setting down her purse with the careful precision of someone trying not to lose control. I figured we might. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same spot where she'd made her phone calls to Jennifer, where she'd planned my destruction while I watched television in the next room. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Jennifer says you have recordings. I do. And Dominic says he's ending things between us. He is. So what now? You've destroyed everything we built together, turned my friends against me, ruined my relationship with... Stop! The word came out harder than I'd intended, cutting through her attempt to reframe herself as the victim. Just stop. She looked at me with surprise. The reliable, predictable Dave didn't usually interrupt her monologues. You want to know what happens now? I continued. Here's what happens. You withdraw your divorce filing. You apologize to Jennifer for involving her in conspiracy to commit fraud. You figure out how to rebuild your life without destroying mine in the process. And if I don't? I placed the digital recorder on the table between us, along with a manila folder containing photographs, GPS tracking data, and a timeline of her activities over the past month. Then I release everything. Your law firm gets a copy, along with the State Bar Association and every real estate office in town. Your parents get to hear the recordings of you planning to frame me for financial fraud. The neighbors get to see the photos of you and Dominic at that hotel. Her face went through several expressions: anger, fear, calculation, and finally something approaching defeat. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had good teachers. You and Jennifer were very thorough in your planning. I just learned from your example. So what do you want? For me to stay married to you? Pretend none of this happened? I looked at her across the table. This woman I'd loved for more than half my adult life, who'd become someone I barely recognized. The truth was, I didn't want her to stay. I wanted her to leave, to find whatever it was she thought she needed, to discover whether the grass was really greener somewhere else. But I wanted her to leave honestly, without trying to destroy me in the process. I want you to go, I said finally. Pack your things. File for divorce. Start your new life. But you do it clean. No false accusations, no fraudulent claims, no attempts to take what you didn't earn. That's it? You're just letting me go? Alicia, you left months ago. I'm just acknowledging reality. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe recognition of what we'd once had and lost. I used to love you, she said quietly. I know. I used to love you too. What happened to us? I thought about that question as I looked at her. What had happened to the young couple who'd bought this house with such hope? When had we stopped being partners and started being adversaries? We forgot how to be honest with each other, I said finally. We got comfortable with small lies, then bigger ones, until we were living completely separate lives under the same roof. And now? Now we tell the truth. You want out, so get out. But you do it with dignity, not destruction. She nodded slowly, understanding that this was the best deal she was going to get. And the recordings? Stay private as long as you honor our agreement. Try to hurt me, and they become very public very quickly. Fair enough. She stood up, smoothing down her skirt in a gesture I'd seen her make thousands of times over the years. I'll start packing tonight. I can stay with Jennifer until I find my own place. Take your time. Do it right. She paused at the kitchen doorway, looking back at me one last time. Dave? Yeah? You're not the man I thought I married. No, I agreed. I'm not. Turns out I'm better. After she left to start packing, I sat alone in our kitchen, listening to the familiar sounds of our house settling around me. Somewhere upstairs, Alicia was dismantling the life we'd built together, packing away the evidence of our shared history. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. Maybe I'd keep the house, maybe sell it and start fresh somewhere else. Maybe I'd go back to boxing seriously, see if there was still something left in these old hands. Maybe I'd just focus on selling houses to young couples who still believed in forever. But tonight, I was content to sit in the quiet aftermath of the storm, knowing that I'd fought the fight that mattered and won it on my own terms. The reliable Honda Civic had finally reached its breaking point, and instead of falling apart, it had discovered what it was really capable of when pushed to its limits. The recall notice had been delivered, received, and acknowledged, and for the first time in months, that was enough.